to talk about critical race theory. Now you have Larry Elder. Larry Elder, who seems to be on his way to become the governor of California. Larry Elder does not believe in any kind of critical race theory. Critical race, so just to begin with, critical race theory is a race theory which is critical. But he doesn't believe we need a race theory. He doesn't believe that we need a critical race theory, or that there is one, or that it's... He doesn't believe in reparations, Larry Elder. He does not believe in systemic or institutional racism, nor endemic and foundational racism. He doesn't see it. He doesn't, so therefore, we don't need reparations. So Larry Elder, in his own words, what do you think about critical race theory?
Good morning, Road Ragers. A black reporter recently said, Elder, what is your opinion about critical race theory? I said, you mean that narrative that pits blacks against whites, that pits Asian Americans against Hispanic Americans?
So right off the bat, Larry Elder says that critical race theory pits black people versus white people, pits Hispanic people versus Asian people. So he's against it, right? This is just divide and conquer. It's just critical race theory isn't actually trying to solve any racism. It's actually perpetuating it.
I said, let me answer the question this way. Pick out your favorite magic wand. Wave it over America. Remove it.
Pick out my favorite magic wand? How many magic wands are there?
Every smidgen of racism from the hearts of white people. Now, everybody white thinks exactly like Mother Teresa.
Now, he seems to think that Mother Teresa is the ultimate of what perfection is. Chris Hitchens thought that Mother Teresa was terrible. Instead of alleviating the suffering of the poor, she just, manifested herself in it. It was almost as if she needed for them to be suffering, for her to feel, like she's suffering with them. So Mother Teresa was actually maintaining the suffering. She wasn't alleviating the suffering. But he's going to say, wave a magic wand over America. Now there's no racism, okay? All the white people are not racist. Now he's going to throw you some evidence and statistics. So these aren't Larry Elder's facts, and I'll repeat them after he's finished.
Do we still have a situation where 70% of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother, an increase from 25% back in 1965?
So he asked 70%, actually I'll just repeat him just to double down, no father. He says today, you have, and I don't know if he's talking about black families, but probably right, 70 black families. Let's just hear him again.
Do we still have a situation where 70% of black kids enter the world without a father married to...
70% of black kids don't have a father married to their mother. So that means they're just not married. So I don't know. I mean, is he there? He could have raised them, but they're just not married to the mother. That's not a missing father problem. That's a missing mother problem. But he's going to say from today to 1965, and he picks 1965 for an important reason, because that's when integration happened. But from 1965 to today, he's saying that 70%, and that this is 25% worse. So 70% of black kids don't have a father married to their mother, and that's 25% worse than what it was in 1965. So that the black family has only deteriorated. It hasn't got stronger since 1965.
Married to the mother, an increase from 25% back in 1965. Do we still have a 50% dropout rate in many of our urban high schools? And many of the kids who do graduate cannot read, write, and compute at grade level? Or 50%
dropout rate.
5% of young black boys in some urban areas still having criminal records. By that I mean in jail, on parole, or on probation.
So he's saying that black families, the father's not married to the mother, and 70% of the families, the father is not married to the mother, then in 50% of black kids' lives are going to drop out of school. 25% of those in urban areas are going to have a criminal record.
Is the number one cause of preventable death for young white men accidents, like car accidents or drowning, versus the number one cause of preventable death for young black men, homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black man? Is the rate at which young black men are killed 8 times the rate at which young whites are killed?
So he's sitting there saying that the main reason why young white people die, drowning, accidents, but not intentional murder. The main reason why young black men die, murder by other black men. And he says that black folks are being killed 8 times more than white folks, young white folks. So whereas young white folks are dying of drowning and accidents, young black men are getting killed just left and right 8 times more than young whites are.
If the answer to those questions are yes, then I submit to you that systemic racism is not the problem, and critical race theory and reparations are not the answer. You're being manipulated. You're being used just for your vote. Knock it off. Now I want you to go to electelder.com.
So knock it off. Knock it off. So there you go. There's Larry Elder. That's going to be the next governor of California. And you know there's only 6% of the population of California are black folks. So it wouldn't hurt Larry Elder to be a white supremacist in blackface. And then you have a lot of old-ass Democrats, a bunch of old-ass Democrats that have early voted. So does that mean that the recall is going to go or not go? These old-ass Democrats, one of the Democrats that established the KKK? So now let's take a look at Rashad Richey. Indisputable, Rashad Richey. This guy is, kick-ass. He's been talking about critical race theory for, I want to see Larry Elder and Rashad Richey debate in real life, but since we won't get that debate, this is the closest that we will get. So I'm going to go through his statistics, but first, let's just listen to Rashad Richey. Has a really good guest, actually, who defends, getting rid of critical race theory very well. And Rashad Richey, defends critical race theory pretty good, too. So we have actually both pro-CRT and anti-CRT voices right here.
Path to education in America, K through 12.
So critical race theory, just putting it very simply, because there are a lot of different definitions that a lot of people like to throw out, but critical race theory, as I best understand it, is a movement of a collection of academics who work in an interdisciplinary fashion to interrogate the role that they believe white supremacy and oppression has had and still continues to have in American society. And so, essentially, it's based on a few key precepts. Number one, that white supremacy is a part of the definition of America's institutions. Number two, that the impacts of white supremacy, far from any sort of individual instance of white supremacy, are still impacting and hurting black Americans today. And number three, you have to engage those impacts in a critical way, which means, as they would say, or at least as they said in critical race theory, the key writings, you have to engage critically, you have to engage in a sort of activist way, especially in the classroom and abroad in political society as well. And so this is really being pushed in education, or at least many of these
I love that definition. My understanding of critical race theory is that there's institutional racism. We need to get reparations. Also, there's racist. There's racism that's out there, and we can all just say, well, I'm not a racist, and then just, throw up our hands and be done with that. Or we need to, make sure that there isn't racism. We have to, push for, we have to do a critical, a critical thing to stop racism. If we all just go about our business, self-segregation, and then there's the wealth gap. That's my biggest argument between white and black. You got a major wealth gap. White people own everything, and people of color own nothing. So and I'll get you the statistics, at the end. But I like this guy. He's against critical race theory, but the way he just defined it, I liked it. But Rashad Richey is going to come back at him and say that he defined it incorrectly. Rashad Richey is kind of a dick. He's a dick to a lot of people. First, it's like he sets you up. He's like, okay, all right, you tell me what you think critical race theory is, and then they'll say, well, I think it's a race theory. That's critical. Well, boy, are you dumb. Let me tell you how you're dumb. Okay, so critical race theory is this, and this, and that, and this, and this, and that. And so that's why I would love to see Larry Elder and Rashad Richey, talk about critical race theory. Now, Richey is going to list a whole bunch of facts down. It takes, well, I guess I could go to it. Let's listen to this for about a minute, and then we'll go to where he lists all the facts, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Okay, there's racism, then where is the racism? Is it in the police shootings? Is it in, what is it? Discrimination, bank accounts? What is it? What's going on? Where's the racism at? According to the statistics, right? According to your readings, according to your
principles, I should probably say, are being pushed in education by the 1619 Project. Now, when many folks hear this, they're like, well, this is nonsense, it's fear-mongering, but it's not. Look at what Nicole Hannah-Jones has said in the essays that are within the 1619 Project curriculum and in her own personal statements. She said that slavery is foundational to America, that the editor for New York Magazine actually said that he wants to reframe history through a black narrative, which puts slavery at the sort of forefront and the emphasis of what America is about. I mean, there are plenty of other essays in the curriculum that kind of do indict America's moral character. So I think that critical race theory principles are most certainly being used in a way that I think is not really appropriate for the classroom.
So let me go back to your original definition and understanding of critical race theory, because you go to some degree and then you don't go to the rest. Critical race theory does not mandate that you become an activist. That's not part of the lexicon of the theory. The theory itself basically says that due to the origin of how we started as a country, we have these biases that are built into policies, institutions, statutes, even the Constitution. Remember, the Constitution said at one point we were 3/5 of a person. The Declaration of Independence said that Native Americans are savages in the language of the Declaration of Independence. And then there are current modern structures that exhibit this same racial dynamic, where the disparity is connected directly statistically to a race variable. And you have to deconstruct that model. You have to reverse engineer that model.
So I kind of got lost there in the explanation, but I'm going to just go ahead and read the statistics that he had listed out here. He's going to later on say that there are racial disparities. Well, look at in school, you have 15% of the kids that are enrolled in school are black kids. So 15% of all the kids in school are black kids, yet the suspension and the expellation rate is 35%. So black kids are getting expelled and suspended twice as much as the white kids, when they only represent they only represent 15% versus 35%. So there's a disparity. He's going to say later on 88% black, Latino versus 10% white. This is stop and frisk. So during stop and frisk, only 10% of the white folks were getting stop and frisk, and 88% of stop and frisk was being used against black and Latino folks, and they happened to be all mostly innocent. So stop and frisk was used as racial profiling, and it racially profiled a lot of innocent people. Then you have pregnancy-related deaths. Black women are more likely to have a pregnancy-related death, 3 to 4 times more likely to have a pregnancy-related death than to white people. 19.1%. It's a longer sentence for the same crime. So black and white person gets convicted for the same crime. The black person has a longer sentence by 19.1%. There's a disparity. Black folks are twice as likely, or black folks are twice as unemployed. The unemployment rate for black folks are twice as much than for white folks. There's a racial disparity. And then job resumes, there's white-sounding names get 50% more callbacks than black-sounding names. So if it sounds white, then they'll, their job resume, people will call them, but if it sounds black, there's less chance, 50% more chance if you have a white-sounding name than a black-sounding name. So there's a disparity. Now, I looked up this, first I looked up critical race theory, and the legal scholars that it all circles around is Patricia J. Williams, Mary Matsuda, Charles R. Lawrence III, Cheryl Harris, Richard Delgado, Kimberly Crenshaw, Alan Freeman, and Derek Bell. So those are some of your legal thinkers, legal scholars that pushed for this and developed it in the mid-1970s. And then CRT is grounded in critical theory, and it draws from thinkers such as Antonio Gramsci, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, as well as the Black Power, Chicano, and radical feminist movements from the 1960s and the 1970s.
Delgado, no one's reading Crenshaw, but I'm saying that critical pedagogy is a method that is being
Pedagogy, he's going to say it's actually pedagogy, which nobody says pedagogy except for academics anyway.
endorsed, especially by the Curriculum of 1619 Project, to teach certain concepts. And that's a self-evident fact.
Okay, so let me correct you on something. It's pedagogy. And the pedagogy that's being taught, that's an educational style. That's a method of teaching. So a theory is not really pedagogy. It's your method of connection.
Go
ahead.
So the theory itself is implemented. So pedagogy is simply the way that the theory is implemented in the classroom. So even though critical race theory itself...
So explain that to me. Explain, how do you make it critical race theory when it's not critical race theory that's being taught? How do you
again, I think you're kind of moving the goalposts here, Dr. Richey, respectively, because I never claimed that critical race theory itself, Delgado, Stefanik, Mary Matsuda, Crenshaw, they were being taught to K-12 people, because they're not. I'm saying that the methodology and the principles of critical race theory are being taught, at least in the 1619 Project and across America. And I think that's
you say that you were...
All right, we're going to go to when he lists off, this is the facts, right? These are the facts. So I probably should have just put the facts side by side and not say anything and just make it 1 minute. So I'll come back and do that. But he takes a while, too, so I feel like I said it quicker than what he said it. But
very well. 4 years of survey data shows that black students represent only 15% of total U.S. students enrolled in public education. But they make up 35% of students suspended once, 44% of students suspended more than once, and 36% of students expelled. That's from the U.S. Department of Education. They also found in their research that this disparity is not explained by more frequent or more serious misbehavior by other students, meaning their behavior was comparable to white students. However, their penalty was much more severe. Let me read you another one. And by the way, I like to always source my data. You can find that U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. The New York City police officers were surveyed based on their stops. This was a survey after the fact. So this is not a lived experience survey. This is an actual data analytical survey. The data analytical survey showed that New York City, 88% of police stops involved black and Latinx people, while 10% involved white people. Of those stops, 70% were completely innocent. So the data doesn't even justify them targeting...
My bad, I said it was stop and frisk, but he was just saying of all stops. So of all the people that was being stopped in New York City or is being stopped in New York City, 88% of those being stopped are black and Latino people, and only 10% are white, and then most of them are going to be innocent.
Black and brown individuals. Another one, and you can find that information, New York Civil Liberties Union, stop and frisk data. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience a pregnancy-related death than white women, even at similar levels of income and education and health. You can find that data, the National Partnership of Women Families study. The next one, on average, black men in the U.S. receive sentences that are 19.1% longer than those of white men convicted of the very same crime. You mean to tell me that I get 20% more time if I'm a black man convicted in America than my white counterparts, and we are convicted of the same exact crime? There's another one. On average, in the U.S., black individuals are twice as likely to be unemployed as white individuals with the same exact background as their white counterparts. That's another data stat. You can find that at the Poverty Action Lab. I'll give you one more. One study found that job resumes with traditionally white-sounding names received 50% more callbacks than those with black-sounding names, and they did this over and over again. They submitted the same education, the same experience, changed the name from Abdul to John, and all of a sudden companies started calling them back. Sir, those are dynamics of systemic bias implicit or hyper-aggressive racism that must be examined? Tell me, how do you back engineer that? How do you examine it without the use of critical race theory?
Well,
we'll get to his answer here in a second. In the 2019 survey, white families have the highest level of both median and mean family wealth, 188,200 and 983,400. So their median wealth is 188,200. The median, so that means they're averaging, they're about right there. But when you average them, actually average them, not just kind of put them side by side and see where they're all kind of at, but if you just take like the richest of the rich, well, the average wealth for white families, 2019, is $983,400. For black and Hispanic families, they have considerably less wealth than white families. Black families' median and mean wealth is less than 15%. That of white families at $24,100 and $142,500 respectively. And Hispanic families' median and mean wealth is $36,100 and $165,500 respectively. So the median, right, so maybe you could say that the super fucking rich, that's not fair, you can't throw the 1% in there, but the 1% takes the average wealth, for the white people, it's almost nearly, a fucking million. It's nearly $1 million in average family wealth. And then for the median, it's $188,000 of their wealth. For black families, $24,000. For Hispanic families, $36,000 of the median. And then the mean wealth, actually, their average wealth really goes up too. So, there's some super rich black folks and super rich Hispanic folks out there too. $165,500, $142,500, but that's still substantially less than $983,400. That's, if I gave you $1,000 versus giving you, $165, that's different, right? Here's $1,000 bucks. Well, here's $165. So white families, have $1 million, right? They're sitting on $1,000 bucks, $1 million bucks. And then black families are sitting on $142, $142,500, or $165,500. So there you go. I think I did the numbers right there.
Well, first of all, so critical race theory, let's be clear about what it is, as we have been doing with the conversation. It is indeed a framework which would look at all of those things, and it wouldn't actually, what you're doing, Dr. Rich, you're actually kind of trying to interrogate a little bit. And words that wound, all of the critical race theorists, particularly Matsuda and Crenshaw and all of them who wrote that book, they're very clear that they actually presume that all racial disparities must have racist outcomes. And there is a conversation.
So there's a wealth gap. There's a major wealth gap, and I feel like that's probably the best one, I would say, too. Equity, wealth, property, money in the bank. There's a wealth gap. There's a wealth gap between black and white folks. A major wealth gap. White people, a lot of white people seem to be doing really good. And they don't give a fuck about you. Or me. Or anybody, really. They're just a fucking dick.